how about the Hart Trophy? Because at the beginning of the season, it looked like McDavid or Draisaitl were just going to run away with it because they were both averaging 2 points a game. And at one point, they were both on pace for 180 points. And the Oilers were 16-5. And everyone thought they were just going to cakewalk their way to the Stanley Cup final. Well, I mean, I guess just Oilers fans thought that, not the rest of the league, like us here on the Gluttons for Punishment podcast. But now things are getting really interesting because Connor McDavid does not lead the league in scoring, and we talked about this on last week's show. That honor belongs to Jonathan Huberdeau right now, who leads the league with 64 points. And, you know, it's not like, okay, the leading point getter is just handed the Hart Trophy for league MVP. That's not how this works. But most of the time, it's Connor McDavid leading the league in scoring by 20 to 30 points, and you have no choice but to hand him the Hart Trophy. But at this point, McDavid, he is the betting favorite to win the Hart Trophy at plus 200, but he sits third in the league in scoring right now, tied with Nazem Kadri with 60 points in 41 games. So how do you see this race playing out?
Hart Trophy. It's a weird one because, like you said, we kind of laughed earlier in the season having this conversation because we just thought give the trophy to McDavid, but it's evened out. And that's because a lot of guys are putting up a lot of points. I think it might be one of those years where you do see like a semi-random winner. And it's kind of funny to say like a random winner of the MVP of the league, but kind of like the Taylor Hall year, where it's like everyone knows Taylor Hall's a great player, but wow, like he won the Hart Trophy. Like that was pretty shocking. So not because he's leading in points. I think Huberdeau has a good shot just because a lot of the time these voters get kind of cute and don't want to pick a typical name, and they have reason to pick him. I'm not taking anything away from Huberdeau. I'm just saying sometimes I think the people who vote on the awards, like they'll look at the list and see Ovechkin, McDavid, Matthews, Draisaitl, Huberdeau, and Huberdeau is kind of like the hot pick, so that they might go that way. But I'm gonna go on a limb and I'm gonna throw another name out there because of the way he's played lately and because of the reasons I just listed. And by that I mean how it's been sort of a weird year, how things have evened out. I'm gonna say Sidney Crosby has a real chance. He has been on absolute fire, Bruno. Like he's up to 40 points. I think's the number, and he missed some games, so he's well over a point a game. There's still a lot of games to go. Pittsburgh is doing a lot better than I think people thought they would do this season. And again, if it's just kind of a jumble of guys who have had unbelievable seasons and Crosby continues on the tear he's been on, why not give another one to Sid? Like I love Sid and I'd love to see it. And I'm not saying at this point that I would pick him for the award. I just think, be my guest, bet against Sidney Crosby not continuing on this tear and showing the league and all the fans of the league that he's not going anywhere when it comes to that list of the best players in the show.
He does have 40 points in 34 games, so you are right. Crosby and Brian Rust in particular on that Penguins team, and even Gensel, those guys have all been on a tear recently. But right now, Lepore, looking at the betting board, Sidney Crosby, you can get him at 50-1.
What?
To win the MVP.
Okay.
So the books aren't on the same page as before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, 50-1, the way Pittsburgh's been playing, they're obviously one of the best teams in the NHL. That's not where my money would go, but I see your thought process there. And I mean, it's hard to bet against Sidney Crosby because when you think this dude is done, when you think he's over the hill, it's the same thing with Ovechkin. It's like, out of nowhere, Ovechkin's just like, I'm just going to lead the league in scoring for a couple of weeks this year at the age of 35 or however old he is now. Same thing with Sidney Crosby, right? These guys still have a ton of game left in them. If I had to pick an MVP at this point of the season, it's really, really tough because I don't know if it's going to go to one of these Edmonton guys, because the thing with Draisaitl and McDavid, right? if they had maintained that point pace from earlier in the season, it'd be an absolute slam dunk. One of them would be winning the MVP. But where things are getting a little interesting now is that the Oilers aren't nearly as good as they were at the beginning of the season. And this is a team that until, the last couple of weeks was in real danger of missing a playoff spot. And they still might miss the playoffs. I mean, just looking at the standings right now in the Pacific Division, the Edmonton Oilers, in terms of points percentage, are 4th in the Pacific Division. Now, I do think the Oilers will find a way to make the playoffs. Like right now, they're actually technically out of a playoff spot. They're 3rd in the wild card race. But when you look at points percentage, they're better than Anaheim, who's technically ahead of them in the standings, but Anaheim has 6 games in hand. But we could be in a situation where, let's say the Oilers do miss the playoffs, and you know how voters think like, oh, even though Connor McDavid had 122 points, this team missed the playoffs, so we have to eliminate him from Hart Trophy contention. There was a season recently where McDavid led the NHL in scoring and did not even finish top 3 in Hart Trophy voting. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's how voters think. And again, I think the Oilers will find a way to make the playoffs, but let's say they miss, or let's say they barely get in, then you're looking at Jonathan Huberdeau, who right now is plus 750, so 7.5 to 1. You have Ovechkin, who's still very much in play to win the MVP at plus 350, considering what he's done this year for Washington. And then, I hate to sound like a Leafs homer, Lepore, but Auston Matthews, 9 to 1 right now to win the Hart Trophy. He finished 2nd in Hart Trophy voting last season.
That's a bet. Ovechkin at 350 is a shit bet. Like Matthews at 9 to 1, that's a bet.
That's the bet right there. And again, I hate to be the Leafs homer. Bruno, you love the Leafs. You love Auston Matthews, blah, blah, blah. But that's actually a really good bet. If he's going to win the Rocket Richard Trophy, if he's going to come close to scoring 60 goals, if the Leafs are going to finish 1st in the Atlantic, if the Leafs, Lepore, the Leafs might even win the President's Trophy. I mean, that's very much in play as well.
And did you say Huberdeau? What's Huberdeau at? Huberdeau
is plus 750.
Again, that's a good bet. Like he's the one, if I could pick right now, it's my partner. That's what I was saying earlier. I would pick him. I mean, 750 is a nice bet for the guy leading the league in points. And again, if people try to be cute, if Florida continues on their roll, it's kind of like an excuse to, like, and it sounds terrible for the NHL, but for a Florida Panthers player to win the MVP, like if there is a chance to give it to him, I think there's a good chance he gets it. But I'll ask you this though. I've always thought, like, usually the leading scorers have the best chance to get it. And you touched on earlier how it doesn't necessarily go whoever leads the league in points, and points have a big thing to do with it. But I'll ask you, say if a guy finishes, say, out of top 5 in points, but number 1 in goals, what would the goal total have to be to merit a Hart Trophy?
I think you either have to lead the league in goals or probably have 50, because I even think back to when Corey Perry won the MVP. I believe he scored 50 goals that season. And that, when you brought up the whole like random MVP years, the Corey Perry year came to me immediately, because we all know he used to be really good when him and Getzlaf were in their primes. But, one year it's just like, oh my God, Corey Perry won the MVP. Like, we know he's a good player, but the MVP of the league. So we could have a situation like that where, let's say Matthews, for example, finishes 7th in scoring or 8th in scoring, but, he wins the Rocket and scores like 55 goals, and the Leafs are a top 2 team, maybe win the President's Trophy. I think he's going to be very much in play to win the award.
I think the number is 60. Because to me, like 60 is kind of that. 50 is a big number, obviously, and a historic number, but 60 is a fuck you number. Like we have one of the recent ones we've seen, we saw Stamkos and Ovechkin, and that's it in recent times, get 60 goals. So I think that's the number. If someone's, say, and it probably would be either Draisaitl or Matthews, but now that I say that, I don't think Draisaitl, especially if he scores that many goals, will be outside the top 4 or 5 in scoring anyway. But I think it's more we're talking about Matthews. If he finishes outside the top 5, what will be the number? And then the one I circle is 60 to have a real shot at the Hart Trophy.
And I think if no one separates in terms of both point total or goal total, I think it's going to come down to really team success. As much as people might hate to hear something like that, it's going to come down to which team is better. Like if it comes down to, okay, who's the MVP, Huberdeau or Matthews? And they have, Huberdeau has more points, but Matthews has more goals. Well, it's like, okay, whose team was better? Right. So it could come down to something like that. But this is going to be a very interesting race this year because last year was like, Connor McDavid had 104 points in 56 games. Like it was just absurd. I think, did he win it? Was he a unanimous MVP? I believe he was. I think he may have been unanimous.
I want to say maybe there was like one he didn't get, or am I thinking of another award in another sport or something? But we'll have to look that up.
Yeah, he was either unanimous or very close to it, and Matthews was second.